Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Netapaharine Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tvayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur Sthapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. This is Raja Yoga. Today is a very important topic. The title of the topic is Psychic Prana. And as I do in every single class, first we'll discuss the relevance. There's a great relevance to this topic. In fact, I gave it an additional topic, a deep dive into psychic prana, the science of Kundalini and willpower. Now, what is the relevance? Whenever we take up any type of topic, we should always ask ourselves first, what is the relevance of it to our lives right now? To our children's lives, to our community, to our country, to the world. So this science, the deep dive into psychic prana and willpower, it has a very great significance. People don't know, in fact, I'm going to make a prediction right now, that just like in the 1950s and 60s, they talked about, no one knew about the cancerous nature of cigarettes, the addictive nature of nicotine, and the cancerous nature of cigarette smoking. Similarly, there's a few studies being done now in this age of artificial intelligence, how it is affecting our cognitive, affective, meaning the thinking, the feeling, and the willing capacities. Lots of studies are being done by leading journals, surprisingly not in America, but can you guess which country? China. Why China? Probably they want to maintain a greater control over the people there, obviously. But even in European journals, I found that it's greatly affecting this idea of doom scrolling. Does anybody know what doom scrolling is? You take the mobile phone and you start watching some short YouTube videos. You watch one after another. They scientifically document physiologically, neurologically, how the dopamine is getting extinct, how our neurotransmitters, including GABA neurotransmitter, glutamate, it's getting fatigued. And the net result of that, what is the net result of that? I wrote an article about this in the Prabhupada Bharata January 2021 issue. It was, can God vision and television go together? That just analyzed the effects of internet on the mind. And it made the argument with very compelling evidence from an author named Nicholas Carr, which was called The Shallows, that how it's affecting our cognitive, affective, how there's something called a virtual spillover, meaning that per the laws of neuroplasticity, if you spend enough time on the computer, on the internet, at that time, your very faculties of thinking, feeling, and willing, are they in a deep level of focus? What type of level? They're in a superficial level. Your feeling of empathy, when you're watching something online, how many of you have seen something violent, something showing on the news, violence online? Now, what is the difference between actually observing that in person as opposed to online? After some time, it's called affectative. That means the feeling capacity, that's getting diminished. In the Yoga Sutras, they say this feeling, we make this distinction, but there's actually no difference, no distinction between this feeling, thinking, and willing. Even the feeling capacity, that's a vritti in itself. Now with AI, this doom scrolling now that's taking place, I want to get back to our topic, because our topic is the topic of the Kundalini and Willpower. But I'm just talking about the relevance in our own personal lives, in our children's lives. Some of you are teachers out here and listening online. What is that doing to the minds of the teachers, to the mind of the students? I just completed Harvard Divinity School 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. One of my friends, he's an instructor in the science department at Harvard. He said that this is the first year he sees the undergraduate students unmotivated. Harvard's supposed to be one of the elite universities in the entire world. You're saying, why I'm bringing this up? This is Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. So Swami Vivekananda was not only a nationalist, he was a globalist as well. This problem is both nationalist as well as globalist. Both. How it's affecting our children. How it's affecting us. So that's, at the end we'll talk about that. Now the second thing, as we do a deep reading of this text, those who have been attending, again, I'm going to take our attention back. Whenever we do a reading of Swami Vivekananda, any reading of Swami Vivekananda, or any author, any spiritual book, what are the two questions that we always ask? When was this written? Who is the audience that he is addressing? So for Swami Vivekananda, when was it written? Who can tell who comes? Huh? It's okay, you can guess, no problem. Okay, it's the first half of 1895. He gave these talks on Raja Yoga. Who was he addressing? I believe we've mentioned like 5 different types of audiences. The physicist, the physiologist, biologist. These are, we can say, one category, scientist. Another category, psychologist, faith healers. What was the last one? Agnostics, Christians who have lost faith in Christianity. Disenchanted what? Disenchanted, yes. And those disenchanted types, they're called agnostics. They became his best followers, and they contributed the most, not only in America, but some of them contributed the most in India as well, in terms of donations and giving their life. So that's the thing, the audience is one idea. Now, another thing we will look at, I mentioned this during the last talk, that when I was in Harvard, a well-known spiritual figure, I won't give his name, he had a discussion with Dr. Steven Pinker, who is one of the leading rationalists. I took a class with him. You can look his name up, Dr. Steven Pinker. He's one of the leading rationalists in the entire world. He's a professor at Harvard. Now there, this spiritual figure, when he was talking to Dr. Steven Pinker, he was saying, you see, you won't understand what I'm talking about, because I've experienced, I'm talking from experience. You're only talking from your books. I want to compare and contrast that with Swami Vivekananda. You can argue what experience did Swami Vivekananda not have? But as we go through the text in chapter 4, just as we have in the other chapters, when we go through each paragraph, I want you to ask yourselves, who is he addressing? You'll see it varies. Secondly, if he's addressing a physicist, what was the laws of physics at that time? Third, how has physics evolved since then? You understand what I'm saying? Is what Swami Vivekananda says still true today? The other subject I want to raise, going back to what I originally said, this is a vital topic, how this artificial intelligence, YouTube, how these things are affecting us. Because otherwise, you might want to do a dive deep into your Vedanta, but without this capacity, what do we have in Vedanta, Advaita? Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. The Shravana means what? Manana, deep thought. Being able to, this, what you call this Dharana Shakti, the power to receive, encode, hold, digest, assimilate, and make one's own. Make it experiential. Now what they're saying with these, going back to this YouTube and this TikToks, what's happening, they show one video, then nothing gets encoded. By the time that's done, they show something else completely different. So you can spend hours and hours, but there's nothing that's getting encoded to present itself to what we call the prefrontal cortex, which is takes the information, takes it, and then stores it afterwards. Okay. So now with that, let's begin. If those of you please open the text, chapter 4, Psychic Prana. Okay, I'm going to begin. According to the yogis, there are two nerve currents in the spinal column called Pingala and Ira, and a hollow canal called Sushumna running through the spinal cord. Now, even this first sentence, who is Swami Vivekananda addressing here? Who can say? What? Just take a guess if you... So he used the word spinal cord. So spinal cord means this physiologist. Okay, he's going to be dealing with that's one of his audiences, physiologist. And how he's putting Ira, Pingala, which are terms that they say, he's mixing them with physiology. And he talks about the Sushumna. At the lower, in fact, I can show one video. Let me just share the screen. Okay, so this is the Ira and Pingala. At the lower end of the hollow canal is what the yogis call the lotus of the Kundalini. They describe it as triangular in form, in which, in the symbolic language of the yogis, there is a power called the Kundalini, coiled up. When that Kundalini awakens, it tries to force a passage through this hollow canal, and as it rises step by step, as it were, layer after layer of the mind becomes opened, and all the different visions and wonderful powers come to the yogi. So he's starting off straight with the mystical experiences of the yogi to a science audience. When it reaches the brain, the yogi is perfectly detached from the body and mind. The soul finds itself free. So far, this is not for all of you would know all of this, but this is completely new to a scientific audience. We know that we know that the spinal cord, now he's going back to the physiology, is composed in a peculiar manner. If we take the figure 8 horizontally, there are two parts which are connected in the middle. Suppose you add 8 after 8, piled one on top of the other. That will represent the spinal cord. So the left is the Ira, and you can see on the screen Ira, and the right is Pingala. And that hollow canal which runs through the center of the spinal cord is the Sushumna. Okay, so far still mainly language about the Kundalini. Where the spinal cord ends in some of the lumbar vertebrae, a fine fiber issues downward, and the canal runs up even within that fiber, only much finer. Now this is interesting. Now Swamiji's, what he's describing here, where did he learn this? He's just giving off the cuff, he's giving these lectures, and you see his knowledge of physiology at that time, where the spinal cord ends in so he knows what are the different, okay, here's a test of physiology. What are the different levels in our spinal cord region? The upper one is the cervical, below that the thoracic, then the lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. So these 5 different places, okay? So where the spinal cord ends in some of the lumbar vertebrae, A fine fiber issues downwards, and the canal runs up even within that fiber. Who can tell? I don't know if there's any, any doctors here? Because this is a trivia question. What would that fiber be? It starts at the L2. It's called filium terminali. It's still good today. So that starts at the L2 level. And I think that indicates where the spinal cord ends. And the canal runs up even within that fiber, only much finer. The canal is closed at the lower end. Let's go to the next one. So you can see, I just have a picture of the spinal cord here. The canal is closed at the lower end. So that would probably be the sacrum or coccyx, what is called the sacral plexus. So you can see the sacrum right here, which according to modern physiology is triangular in form. So let's see Swamiji's, in this one paragraph, off the cuff, Swamiji's deep knowledge of physiology. The different plexuses that have their centers in the spinal canal can very well stand for the different lotuses of the yogi. What are the different plexuses? They're a little bit different than the different regions. Can anyone say? Let's start. I think the first one would be the cervical plexus. Below that, the cervical plexus, I think, goes to the shoulder and diaphragm and the neck. And below that is, I think, the brachial plexus. Below that is the lumbar plexus. Then I believe the sacral plexus. These 4 different plexuses. And yeah, it's right here. Cervical. No, it's not there. We'll get to it. The yogi conceives of the different plexuses that have their centers in the spinal canal can very well stand for the different lotuses of the yogi. So I did mention that. So the cervical plexus is from C1 to C4. That includes the neck, shoulders, diaphragm. The brachial plexus is from C5 to T1. That includes the arms and hands. Then the lumbar plexus. Those are the peripheral nervous system. That's what you call, those are fibers that lead directly to the lower back and front of thigh. So you've heard of the peripheral nervous system. As you're going down the canal, the spinal canal, you have nerves going from both sides to the different parts of the body. And finally, the sacral plexus, which is L4 to S4. The yogi conceives of several centers, beginning with the Muladhara, the basic, and ending with the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petal lotus in the brain. So if we take these different plexuses as representing these lotuses, the idea of the yogi can be understood very easily in the language of modern physiology. What is Swamiji doing here? He's trying to make understandable this esoteric language about the Kundalini to physiologists. And if you want to just guess, when he says that each plexus has a corresponding chakra, you can say the Muladhara might correspond with the sacrum. And the Swadhisthana would probably be this, the coccygeal, sacral, and lumbar. And so on. You can say then the next one, lumbar, and then brachial plexus might be near the Anahata Dhvani, the Anahata plexus, and the Vishuddha would be the cervical plexus. That's the approximation of the plexuses with the different chakras. Swamiji continues, we know there are two sorts of actions in these nerve currents. One afferent, the other efferent. One sensory and the other motor. What is the afferent again? Towards the brain, right. And efferent is what? Brain to the different part, yes. One centripetal and the other centrifugal. Who is Swamiji's audience here? He was using physiology, suddenly he switches. What branch of science is this? Centripetal, centrifugal. Huh? Physics, yes. See, Swamiji's brain is so multi-dimensional. You get just a small insight into vastness of Swamiji's mind. Then he goes back to physiology. One carries the sensations to the brain, and the other from the brain to the outer body. These vibrations are all connected with the brain in the long run. Several other facts we have to remember. This spinal cord at the brain ends in sort of a bulb in the medulla, which is not attached to the brain, but floats in a fluid in the brain. So that's called this oblongata medulla. That's right below the brain. And that fluid, what is the name of that fluid? I think it's cerebrospinal fluid. So that if there be a blow on the head, the force of that blow will be dissipated in the fluid and will not hurt the bulb. So what he means, of course, is that between the brain and the skull, if there's a blow to the head, so something has to absorb that shock, otherwise the brain will get damaged. So this fluid inside absorbs the shock. This is an important fact to remember. Secondly, we have also to know that of all the centers, we have particularly to remember three: the Muladhara, Sahasrara, and the Manipura. Okay. Next, we shall take one fact from physics. Okay, so now who's Swamiji going to address? So you have different, you have physicists sitting on one side, physiologists, all types. So next we shall take one fact from physics. We all hear of electricity and various other forces connected with it. What electricity is, no one knows. But so far as it is known, it is a sort of motion. So at that time, electricity was still not so well developed. It was 1895. Nikolai Tesla presented some ideas and some experiments in the World Parliament of Religions, the World Chicago World Fair, but it was still not very well developed. There are various other motions in the universe. What is the difference between them and electricity? So that's another, what are the different, see Swamiji's vast knowledge, what are the different types of motions that we can say? He's addressing the physicist. One is this mechanical motion, right? That's the sound waves. And the other is this, what Swamiji is talking about, electromagnetic motion. He's going to talk about this. This was in 1895. The electron was not discovered until 1897. And the elliptical movement of the electron and the proton inside the nucleus was not discovered till 1913. So Swamiji is relying here upon the laws of electromagnetism. And just so we know, the other motions are the chemical motion, thermal motion, fluid motion, electrical motion, so many different types of motions. So there are various other motions in the universe. What is the difference between them and electricity? Again, it's Swamiji is just saying this just in a lecture, but you see what's his knowledge? So much depth he has in so many fields. Now he continues, suppose this table moves, that the molecules which compose this table are moving in different directions. If they are all made to move in the same direction, it will be through electricity. Electric motion makes the molecules of a body move in the same direction. So what Swamiji was talking about here, I believe the electromagnetic vibration, again, electrons were not known at that time, but even these molecules, they move in random directions. But when it's connected to a battery, then what happens? There's a velocity drift, and it moves in one direction. Electric motions which make and why is he saying that? He's doing something, he's going to eventually connect this to the Kundalini. He's getting the stage ready. Again, if he just first starts off and talking about the Kundalini, everybody will turn off. Swamiji, it's a really interesting technique. Sister Nivedita described Swami Vivekananda's ability as a teacher, which he learned from Ramakrishna. Speak to everybody in their own language. This doesn't mean just like Hindi, English, Hindi, Bangla. No, their own language. So the physicist, he'll speak to the physicist in their language. The biologist in his language. The physiologist in his language, the psychologist in his language. If all the air molecules in a room are made to move in the same direction, it will make a gigantic battery of electricity of the room. Another point from physiology we must remember, that the center which regulates the respiratory system, the breathing system, has a sort of controlling action over the system of nerve currents. Okay, now we're going again from what? Physics to physiology. And I learned a lot about I learned so much physiology and biology just reviewing because of what Swamiji's language. So now, Swamiji mentioned the bulb below the skull. What's the name of that again? The medulla oblongata. Yeah. Now that is the respiratory. That contains, I looked this up, the dorsal respiratory group, ventral respiratory group. Anyways, that generates this automatic rhythm of breathing. It sends signals to the diaphragm, and it, we'll talk about it later on, what else it does. So Swamiji is using that language, again, respiratory system, the breathing system has a controlling action over the system of nerve currents. And this, we're going to find out these nerve currents go both to the brain as well as the different parts of the body. Swamiji continues, now we shall see why breathing is practiced. In the first place, from rhythmical breathing comes a tendency of all the molecules in the body to move in the same direction. We can stop sharing. Okay, so notice what Swamiji says, rhythmical direction, rhythmical breathing. What is he referring to, this rhythmical breathing? We talked about this earlier chapter. This is psychic prana. What was before psychic prana? Prana itself, breathing. So we already discussed in great depth about the importance of rhythmical breathing, and even how it shows today that this asana posture and breathing, how it leads to, according to modern empirical studies, it leads to improvement in cognitive faculties, thinking, feeling, willing, and it has many test results from leading reputed journals, which I mentioned in past talks. Now Swamiji continues, in the first place, from rhythmical breathing comes a tendency of all the molecules in the body to move in the same direction. What does that mean? When mind changes into will, the nerve currents change into a motion similar to electricity, because the nerves have been proved to show polarity under the action of electric currents. So now the question, what does Swamiji mean by will, when mind changes into will? So he's addressing physiologist and psychologist and physicist. So will has a different function there. In the yoga Sankhya philosophy, this Ichha Shakti, this Dhriti, this Buddhi yoga, that's what he means by will, the discerning faculty that stands behind the mind, manas. That's one type of will. Now when mind changes into will, the nerve currents change into a motion similar to electricity, because the nerves have been proved to show polarity under the action of electric currents. So I did some study on this. The neurons in the brain, they're polarized. How? So you might know the cell is the cell of a neuron. It contains a cell. Within the cell, there's the cytoplasm, and inside the nucleus, the DNA, the mitochondria. This is a tough question, so I need a physiologist here. What is the element of the table of elements? What is the element that resides inside the neuron cell? And that's potassium. Outside is this sodium chloride. So sodium chloride, it's negatively and positively charged. So sodium chloride is always entering into the cell, neuron cell, and potassium is also going outside. So how Swamiji knew about this polarity? See how that's something amazing. The nerves have been proved to show polarity under the action of electric currents. This shows that the will is transformed into the nerve currents. It is changed into something like electricity. When all the motions of the body have become perfectly rhythmical, the body has, as it were, become a gigantic battery of will. This tremendous will is exactly what the yogi wants. So now let's stop here for a second. Let me go back to sharing something. Okay. Okay, I want to now explain something. This is very technical, but this is actually what Swamiji was talking about. I don't know how, this is a concept called psychophysiological coherence. It talks about the harmony, and you can look this term up later. It talks about this harmonization between the brain, the different parts of the brain, and the body. It talks about synchronicity between the body, the brain, and the rest of the body. Psychophysiological coherence. How does that work? And how does it start? Again, I'll show you empirical studies to prove this. Swamiji mentioned rhythmical breathing. So scientists have now done studies, and it shows if you engage in deep breathing means what? 6 breaths per 60 seconds. That basically means 5 seconds inhale, 5 seconds exhale. 6 times, 1 minute. Now, from that type of breathing, what happens? So, in your lungs, when you're breathing, the diaphragm is expanding. You're breathing in oxygen, right? And the alveoli sacs, I think it's called, it takes the oxygen, it distributes that hemoglobin into the bloodstream, and you're getting oxygen, then hemoglobin to the different parts of the body. But in addition to that, there's what we call stretch receptor nerves on the heart and lungs. The cardiary stretch receptors and pulmonary stretch receptors. So when you take a deep breath, they say 6 times, six breaths in 60 seconds. You can do that. Along with what we talked about before, straight posture. Because without straight posture, you can't have full breathing of the diaphragm. That goes back to our point, like when we're looking at the mobile with the tuk-tuk, what is our posture at that time? It's all connected. Then that's the first stage. So there's a rhythm of breathing going on at that level. Then the next stage that happens, that rhythm, that slow breathing is communicated to the oblongata medulla, right below the brain skull. And inside the oblongata medulla, there's a nerve, it's called the vagal nerve. That is actually that's the controlling, I would say, of the central nervous system. And it also, it's like the central nervous system controller right there, the vagal nerve. What that vagal nerve does, it's a fiber inside the oblongata medulla, below the skull. What that does, when it receives this information, it sends a signal to where? It sends a signal, let me see. Yes, that's right. You can look at the screen right there. Different parts of the brain. The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is known as the CEO of the brain. It's the executive planner. It's our Mahanta in Advaita Ashrama. whatever, that's a prefrontal cortex, PFC. Another part of the brain, it's called ACC, anterior cingulate cortex. That deals with emotion. It also sends signal to the amygdala, which amygdala is relevant, and the hypothalamus is another, it's relevant. They communicate whether or not to turn on something called the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. We'll talk about that. So anyways, it's communicating with all these different parts of the brain. Ironically, these different parts of the brain that I just mentioned, the prefrontal cortex, the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, emotion, all these different parts, what do they have in common? These thinking, feeling, and willing faculties are all physiologically in that part in the brain. It's communicating with those different parts of the brain. From there, what happens? It's sending, the vagal nerve is sending a signal to these other parts of the brain. It's saying things are okay. What that does, it modulates the blood pressure, the oscillation of the blood pressure gets modulated. The brain waves patterns, they emit what you call more gamma waves. The gamma, the different gamma, we talked about this earlier classes, the gamma, theta, alpha, beta waves, they were discovered in the 1940s. They say that deep meditators, they did some studies in Harvard with Buddhist monks. They said that deep meditators, they emit what type of wave in the brain? The gamma wave, gamma. The quality of emotion, that also it all gets synchronized. At the same time, not only there, then this VTA, the ventral tegmental area, which produces dopamine, which has neurotransmitters, what we're going to talk about afterwards with how we get, when we watch too many videos, what happens to our mind, we get exhausted. It regulates the dopamine. All those signals are communicated again to the vagal nerve. Then the vagal nerve sends those receptors directly, not through the spinal canal, but directly to the pulmonary and cardiac receptors. And that brings synchronicity. That activates the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, what happens when we're under stress? They say that means fight or flight. At that time, this cortisol from the adrenaline glands, this cortisol gets secreted, and we're really stressed out. But it activates this parasympathetic, which means calmness. I'm no longer reacting. I'm doing what? I'm responding. Another key thing scientists measured, it's called HRV. What does HRV stand for? Heart rate variability. I didn't know this before. And see, this is all because of Swamiji. That means what? It's not how many beats a minute your heart does. Your heart might be 60 beats a minute, 80 beats a minute. Usually it's between 60 and 100. But what it counts is the time between each heartbeat. Say that one heartbeat is 0.8 seconds, the next is 1.2 seconds. So there's this oscillation in the heart rate variability. What these scientists have found, this is the latest research, that those with a higher heart rate variability, meaning those that have 0.8 one time, 1.2 next, their hearts are healthier. Why is that? Because it's more flexible. That heart, which is just beats every second the same, 1 second, whatever, that's less flexible. Because life is not always just roses, Sometimes you're going to be in a calm state. Other times, we'll have to activate the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. But it's that ability to oscillate between, real life is actually oscillating between the sympathetic, between fight and flight, between stress, and going back to the parasympathetic, which means calmness, a state of homeostasis. That's the test of a healthy heart. So now this concept of psychophysiological coherence, I'm just going to give the official definition, is an optimal state of internal balance where the body, mind, and emotions are synchronized, leading to increased order, harmony, and efficiency in physiological and psychological processes. It's characterized by a highly ordered interaction between the heart and brain, often triggered by sustained positive emotions, and can be regulated through techniques like breath work and positive focus to reduce stress and improve overall well-being and performance. Again, going back to what Swamiji says, he says, in the first place, from rhythmical breathing comes a tendency of all the molecules in the body to move in the same direction. When mind changes into will, the nerve currents change into emotion similar to electricity. When all the motions of the body have become perfectly rhythmical, the body has, as it were, become a gigantic battery of will. This is this psychophysiological coherence, which was discovered in the 21st century. Swami Vivekananda is talking about this in 1895. Now, I just want to use some empirical evidence to support my claim, because I think this is like a large problem that even you might have like a leading yoga practitioner, or you might have like a devotee who's like a leading pulmonologist. But the problem is that they'll just use language, they won't use the latest studies. They'll just use the language of yoga, or they'll use the language of basic physiology. But everything we talk about has to be supported by peer-reviewed journal articles. So I'm going to cite a couple of here. In 2022, from the Journal of Neuroergonomics, Savaz and Couch, and if anybody wants, they can write the email. If they want further cites, I'll be happy to provide. They did the finding that slow breathing increases the vagal tone and baroflex gain, improving cognitive control. This slow breathing means what? 6 times over 60 seconds, but practicing it in a more systematic, controlled manner. This brought about this control. This is not me or even any monk making this claim, but this is supported studies. Again, another study in 2024 by Shao in the Journal of Mindfulness, they found that slow-paced breathing improved the heart rate variability, which caused lower heart rate and increased parasympathetic balance. Parasympathetic balance, again, is what? That's the calming. That's what calms our mind. Another one in the Frontier of Psychology, they found that 30-day slow breathing training enhanced sleep and emotional regulation. How many of us here, and also watching online, how many of us would like to have better control over our emotions? Another study they found in 2010, McCarthy and Childress, that heart-brain coherence increases cognitive performance and emotional stability. So Swamiji is talking about this rhythmic breathing leads to a rhythmic pattern between the mind and body. He's going to take it one step further, but you see the groundwork he's laying to now, he's doing all of this not to support this, but to go to something about the awakening of the Kundalini, which we'll get to next time. But you see the groundwork he's establishing, the foundation he's establishing through physiology, physics. And finally, there's just one final study. It's entitled Emotion Self-Regulation, Psychophysiological Coherence, and Test Anxiety. What they did was they used an intervention. It was given to high school students, which instructed them in a set of regulation coherence techniques. So this was not only breathing, this was also mindfulness training. This was also when I get triggered to, rather than react, to be able to, what we say in Vedanta, to observe that, this Drisha Viveka, to observe that reaction, not to be identified with it, but to actually observe it. So they actually received training in these different in these different techniques. And what they found with these high school students, that through this intervention, these students who were normally very stressed, through this breathing patterns, through these deep breathing, that brought about a change in their cognitive, affective, and willing faculties. Through what we mentioned, through the stretch receptors and the cardiac and pulmonary stretch receptors, going to the vagal nerve, going and communicating to the prefrontal cortex, the different parts of the brain, and back and forth. So I've presented a lot of information with a lot of technical information. And the reason why I did it, because actually the topic of today's title was a deep dive, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, Psychic Prana, a deep dive into willpower and Kundalini. Next week we'll talk about the Kundalini, but this was just the willpower and what basically reading the text that Swamiji had said and just laying a foundation. It's also really important because if a lot of times we hear like these Vedantic theories, we hear these wonderful lectures. So what I find even with myself and many of my friends, that it stays at the cognitive levels. The problem is that we don't make it experiential. I'll give my own life story. I remember when I was first studying Vedanta, I was working at that time. I was working as a lawyer, and I remember Swami Prabodhananda in San Francisco, a very calm monk. He would talk about Vedanta. So I would always sit in the very front, and he'd be talking about these principles of Vedanta, and I'm thinking, okay, how can I apply that in the courtroom? So these things, I was telling this to a friend, these things that we hear, it's not about applying them to the world. It's about applying them to our own mind, our own experiences, our own reactions. And I find the problem with all of us in a sense, that we keep it at the cognitive, but that question never comes. How do we make it experiential? So the first step, what I feel in making it experiential, we have to convince ourselves. That's one of the reasons why I did this, because sometimes we just state things, but no, what does that mean? How exactly does deep breathing, what happens in the lungs, what happens in the heart, what happens in the brain, what are the nerves in the brain? You know, the more deep we can go into it, the more self-aware we become, and then the more likely we are to try to change our behavior. Okay, with that I conclude the talk, and if anybody has any questions or they want to discuss something regarding this topic, please, you can please ask. Or if any point you want to make, it doesn't have to be even a question. It can just be something that struck you. It's not about the talk, it's about you. And maybe how can we apply this in our own life? How can we make this experiential? So, you can say your name. And then
my name is Dipayan Das. My question is like Khechari, Gochari. Can we also relate this Raja Yoga with Tantra?
Okay, can we do what?
This Raja Yoga, these emotions with Khechari, Gochari or with Tantra concepts, how it will go?
Raja
Means
Yoga,
you are talking about emotion. Is this emotion is a kind of Devi?
Okay.
Means I just like a correlation between Tantra and this Raja Yoga.
So I just want to say one thing first. And this is a philosophical point, which I did not get into. So I just want to address that first. So you know the 6 different systems of philosophy that we've talked about in early, Vedanta, Yoga, Sankhya, Vaisheshika, Nyaya. One more. Now, normally like Vedantas and they say Sankhya Yoga, it's separate from Vedanta, right? It has its own cosmology. Vedanta borrows the cosmology of Sankhya Yoga. Tantra is something entirely different. It doesn't really fit into with yoga. This is where Swami Vivekananda has taken liberty, and this is due to his expansion. And not only that, I believe that a lot of what he's talking about, you can read the text of Ramakrishna where he talks about the Kundalini. It's in the Lila Prasanga, the Katamrita, the great master, the gospel. He talks about his own first-hand experiences about the Kundalini. Swamiji himself had experiences. So I believe that's why he's bringing those concepts in here, because normally they don't fit into Raja Yoga. And that's the first point I wanted to make. Now you were asking about emotions. Could you repeat that?
Yeah. Emotion, can we correlate? It's like a Devi or it's in a as Khechari or Gochari with Tantra concept. Can we?
Well, I'll just first take emotions, because the concept is Raja Yoga, which is part of the yoga philosophy. So yogas are a vritti. Yogas themselves, the feelings, emotions, they're also vrittis too. We'll talk about that when we get to the Yoga Sutras. They're kleshas, klishta vrittis. They're strong emotions. They're strong thoughts. They're like complexes in the mind. So yes, in yoga, these feelings are considered to be vrittis or thoughts. That's one point I wanted to make.
Okay.
What were you saying about Tantra?
No, I am actually learning both Raja Yoga and I'm going through some texts. So I thought, is there any correlation? Because the concept is very much same. As it is in Raja Yoga or as this Kundalini Yoga, as it is shown in Raja Yoga, it's the same in Tantra also.
Right. But regarding emotions, there are some similarities, but also lots of difference. Philosophically, there's lots of differences, because in Tantra and Kashmir Shaivism, they take this world as real, Shiv Shakti. This world is made of Shiva. And in yoga, it's this Purusha and Prakriti. So there's some philosophical differences. So I wouldn't know how to actually, we can talk about it next time. But there's some differences, but there are also some philosophical difficulties in trying to merge them together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any role of Ida and Pingala in human body? What is the role of Ida and Pingala?
Well, so I think they said that Ida in Pingala, we can go to that. They said that one Ida, Pingala, so they're different. He correlates it like the right nostril is the Pingala and the left nostril is the Ida. So breathing in and out. With the human body, Swamiji gives some rough physiological correspondences, but these are more subtle, These Ida, Pingala, even those are more subtle. They can't be seen with the naked human eye. For that, we have to have that instrumentality of the mind of the yogi to be able to perceive these things through that sukshma chakshu, through that subtle eye. So all these things, Swamiji is trying to give some approximate correspondences with the different chakras, the Ida, Pingala as well, with the different parts of the body. But ultimately, one is at the stula level, the gross level, and one is at the subtle level. So they're just mere approximations.
Sir, in this picture diagram, Ida Pingala is shown like is going like a coil, but in some pictures it's shown like it's go straight. This is the one question, means exactly how Ida Pingala moves. And second is like the journals you have referred. You can also share on the link or the name on our WhatsApp group so that we can go through that.
Again, how the Ida and Pingala move, these are just they can't be kind of shown in a diagram even. Those are just mere, those are to be experienced. These are at the subtle level, not at the physical level. So it's not like, like a sine wave or something like that. So I think those are things that whatever diagram you have, those are just speculations. If Thakur draws a diagram, I think he once drew a diagram. He gave it to the Holy Mother, it got lost. I'd believe that. But these are just, just someone's imagination. So and if anyone else knows, they can answer. Oh, no, you... Okay. Okay. Yeah. Intersecting at the lotus, okay. Okay, so Ira and Pingala saying are intersecting at the lotus. You mean the heart level, the anahata? You mean at the anahata chakra? Oh, okay. 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 Yes. Yes. Okay. We'll discuss next week. We'll talk about Kundalini. So what Anuradha ji, what she just said, and I'll do some further research on this as well, and see what the original text says as well. But that looks like what you're saying is. Yeah. In fact, next week we'll read about. Next time we'll talk about Ramakrishna's experience with the awakening of the Kundalini as well, his own first-hand experience, what he talks about. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let me just check online if there's any. How do you check the online chat? No. Can you just? Oh, stop sharing. I'll stop sharing. Okay. Where's the online? Okay, one question is there. Okay. No, I don't see anything. Okay. Okay, no chat. Okay. Okay. How is one supposed to know if it's actually Kundalini rising, or rather a mental projection of a person on spiritual path? Are there any methods to discern the falsities? If it's actually Kundalini rising, or rather a mental projection of a person on spiritual path, are there any methods to discern the falsities from the actual uprising of Kundalini Shakti, since we see a lot of people selling Kundalini courses like hotcakes these days? That's a very Abhik Ganguly. So that's a very apropos question. So sometimes I go to some places and I've not met, everyone seems to have some Kundalini experience. So what is the test of that? So one test is this, just referring to what Ramakrishna said, that unless the mind is very pure, nirbhashana, then what will happen, an equivalent to this, you remember during the Kalpataru, one Vaikuntanath Sanyal, he was touched by Ramakrishna. And he said, Chaitanya Hok, and his consciousness was awakened. Then what happened? He was seeing Thakur, having some experience of consciousness. But at the same time, he's not able to, he has desires, he has to run his shop, he has to have a business, he has a family to take care of. So what's happening actually is that he's about to go mad. What's happening? The mind is at an elevated state, but these desires are bringing it down. So that's one explanation, that if one has a real Kundalini experience, one thing is the mind will be nirbhashana, it'll be desireless. Another thing that Thakur said, Ramakrishna said, was that every time the chakra gets pierced, each of the chakras that we talked about gets pierced, that is like voltage of energy is getting distributed to the brain, to the mind. So it's like sometimes like a 10,000 watt. So who can withstand that? That mind must also be really to tapasya, purity. It has to be that type of strength that it can withstand the shock. Kundalini shock is not so easy to withstand. Otherwise it can make somebody go mad. And that's one thing. The other thing is digesting. If it's a genuine Kundalini experience, to digest that is not so simple either. Okay? So the ultimate answer to that question, it would take a teacher, a realized teacher. You can ask the guru or a realized teacher. They would only be able to instruct. But we can also look at the experiences of Ramakrishna and what he talked about, Swami Vivekananda, and try to tally that with the text. Maharaj, what disciplines have I to follow to practice Raja Yoga? So we're talking about that, the different disciplines. First discipline would be this yamas and niyamas, which we talked about in the second class. So those have to be practiced. The ethical living, that's really important. And finally, Pranayama, what are the rhythmic motions of the body? And can it be activated by yogic prana? Do we need to go through the yogic prana exercises to arouse the Kundalini? So, I would say before that, those are higher level things. So what we talked about today is just simple breathing. We'll talk about next time about deeper breathing techniques, pranayama more, and what, according to Swami Vivekananda. But this time we could, what the scientists are saying, slow breathing. They have this 60-second 6 breaths. So just starting with that trying to practice that a few times a day, keeping the posture straight. And then just so in and out. So we can experiment with these things. And one thing I want to clarify, that sometimes, like when we see Ramdev Baba and this pranayama, there's 2 ways to do breathing. One is for physical exercise. So you see that sometimes they're doing breathing heavily. So what is that doing? That's increasing the heart rate. That's very good. That increases the volume, the tenor of the breath. Yet, there's another type of breathing. Not making any noise. That lowers the heart rate. So before meditation, that's the type of that we want to do. That lowers the heart rate. And I believe that's what that type of breathing they're talking about here. This rhythmic breathing that starts in the heart. Then it goes to the vagal nerve, then it goes to the different parts of the brain, then the brain again communicates with the vagal nerve, which then, that whole synchrony that Swami Vivekananda talked about, rhythmical breathing. So that's something that we can try for a few weeks. Just when we feel stressed, just remember that. You can even, if you're riding the train, you could even do it on the way back. Nobody has to know you're not doing it. Okay, with that we'll close. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat.